Let's dive in.
Breech,
we'll start with you.
Ooh.
We're each going to do 2 winners and 1 loser. And I want to preface this by saying that I think it is really, really difficult to find losers in this draft. Agreed. It's always difficult in the first place to find losers in a draft because you're like, oh man, I kind of like that player and I like that player. And yes, they reach for this. But in this particular draft, I went through every team. Like, not like this is rocket science, but when the draft ends, I go through every team. I look at their draft class. You sort of try to soak it in from a global perspective and say, all right, did they do a good job drafting? Obviously, you put more weight on the early picks. And every single team that didn't have good early picks usually had no early picks. And they didn't have those early picks because they traded for someone like Tyreek Hill or Devontae Adams. Like, I'm not labeling the Raiders as losers because they didn't pick early. They got Devontae Adams. I was looking at the Dolphins draft class. I was like, this is what a bunch of losers. And I was like, oh, right, they have Tyreek Hill. You know, and so the trades to me have to factor into it. Do we all agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think conversely, to not always just think that the teams that make like 15 picks are winners because they have more. I mean, that's what you want to do as a team, but I think we gravitate toward the teams that have 3 first-rounders. They did an amazing job, or the teams, and actually I think Breech is going to talk about one of these teams that I think had a good draft too, but usually the teams that have like 11 or 12 picks, everyone kind of wants to say, oh, they did a great job. Look, they got that guy, this guy, and that guy, when that's not always the case.
Am I giving both of my winners just like a snake draft?
No, give one. We'll do a 2-rounder, and then we'll each give a loser.
All right. Well, then I'll just start. I was going to start with a position, but nope. I'm going to start with my first number 1 winner, and that is the Baltimore Ravens. I just feel like every time someone went up to announce a Ravens pick, it was a home run. It was starting with Kyle Hamilton, their first pick, and maybe not so much their last pick, but, you know, by then you're getting to the bottom of the 6th round. But everything before that, I mean, we were talking about besides Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Linderbaum fell in their lap in the first round. So just if they would have just ended the draft with those 2 picks, I think they're winners. And then you add David Ojabo, probably fell again into the Ravens. Everything fell Baltimore's way. It's almost impossible to believe that this happened. I mean, he felt like a guy who was a top 40 prospect by most people, falls to 45 to the Ravens. Travis Jones was someone who most people pegged going in the 2nd round, falls to the 3rd round to the Ravens. And when you're talking about Baltimore, you're always talking about their defense, and to be able to add Hamilton and Travis Jones is unbelievable. I could even talk about punters. I mean, my goodness, if there is one person I am never going to second guess when it comes to special teams, kickers, or punters, it is John Harbaugh. He's a former special teams coordinator. Nobody knows more. No head coach in the NFL knows more about special teams than him. So the fact that he took Jordan Stout over Matt Ariza is completely fine with me, and I'll talk about that later. Even in the 4th round with Jalen Armour Davis, I mean, it was just, my God, how did they get him? He should have been way off the board before 119th overall. And that's what it felt like with the Ravens' whole draft was, how did they get that person? How was that person still available at that number? And just, it was a masterclass in drafting. Congratulations, Ravens. You get an A+ for me.
I'm not sure I've ever called the Ravens a loser in any draft I've ever covered.
They do an awesome job in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, they're just a great job at it. Traps, give us a winner from the draft.
I'm going to go with the Cleveland Browns, Josh's team. I think, I mean, you obviously have to factor in that they have Deshaun Watson, but like you were mentioning, Will, that for teams that don't have a bunch of those early picks, to just not really fault them for that, especially if they have a really good player. I like Martin Emerson, the corner from Mississippi State. I like his length. This was a corner class that did not have a lot of tall, long, lanky corners. He's one of them. I think he's good in man and zone. Alex Wright, someone that looks like Myles Garrett and that he's around the same size. If he learns pass rushing moves from Garrett, I think he can be a steal in the 3rd round. I like David Bell. I'm a little concerned about his long speed, but I think we're moving into this NFL where the Deebo Samuels and the A.J. Browns and the DJ Moores of the world, these 6 foot, 200+ wide receivers are winning so well after the catch because they're thick. They have running back like ability, contact balance through the roof. That's where David Bell wins. And he's really good in contested catch situations. And that was always like wide receiver needs to be addressed. I liked Perry and Winfrey, that inside position along their defensive line needed to be addressed, and it was with kind of a penetrator that can play up and down the line. Cade York, Breech can speak more to him than I can. I didn't dive super deep into the specialists. And then I agree with what Josh said about Michael Woods to double dip on the wide receiver spot. He's kind of a possession receiver. I like that. I liked Isaiah Thomas. He's NFL ready edge rusher, doesn't have as much upside as Alex Wright, but I think he can be really good as a rookie. And then I even like Dawson Deaton, the 7th round center from Texas Tech. He's tall, and you usually don't like centers to be tall, but he plays with good knee bend. I think his athleticism is really good. He can recover if he's beaten. Just to add to that already really rock solid offensive line. I think just up and down, addressing needs with players that I thought should have gone a lot earlier, similar to like what the Ravens did. They let the draft come to them. So 2 really strong drafts, in my opinion, in the AFC North.
AFC North crushing it.
The Browns, I mean, if you're the Browns and you come out of the draft as winners with getting good players after you took Deshaun Watson, putting aside the off-field stuff, I mean, you got to feel pretty good about where you are relative to competing or getting back to competing. I will say, actually, I won't say because I think Josh is going to touch on this later, but the Browns do have a lingering issue out there. Josh,
you have to let it.
How about a winner?
I went with the Seattle Seahawks. I've been a little critical of them through this process, just not knowing if they were trying to be competitive for the coming season or if they were entering a rebuild process. But I think we kind of saw their strategy play out over the course of these 3 days. We talked a lot about the offensive line and how much help they needed. So they go out, they add Charles Cross from Mississippi State at number 9 overall, who was my 2nd rated offensive tackle. 2nd round, you get Boye Mafe, who I valued very highly. People talk about him as kind of a pass rush specialist, but I think he's more well-rounded than that. I don't think he's as big of a liability in coverage or in run defense as maybe what many people have suggested. Kenneth Walker III obviously may have not been the biggest need for that franchise, but a guy that was my top-rated running back. Just a physical player, good ankle flexion, can bounce it out to the outside and really get yards after contact. Abraham Lucas, again, a right tackle that is very athletic. You plug and play him on that offensive line. You just need to add bodies to that unit. Kobe Bryant, traditional Seahawks cornerback, great length, physical. He's going to attack the ball at the catch point, all that kind of stuff. Same thing with Tariq Woolen. Thought that was fantastic value to get them where they did at that point in the draft. Tyreek Smith is a guy that Traps loves.
Yep.
As an edge rusher. Bo Melton, I think, is fantastic after the catch, his ability to work in space, the wide receiver from Rutgers. And then you finish out with Derek Young, who is a wide receiver by nature, but probably big enough that he can be a tight end at the next level, split him out into the Y and use him downfield. So just a really well-rounded draft class, I think. And you can kind of see their process as it unfolded over the course of those 3 days.
So I'm going to go against the grain, against podcast narrative, and say,
bring it. Bring it.
I mean, I don't know how you look at the Philadelphia Eagles draft and don't think that the Eagles are big time winners after this draft. Because I go to our CBS Draft Tracker page. Like I'm on the same page that you're seeing on your screen right now if you're watching on YouTube. And I'm like, man, they landed Jordan Davis. They also pulled Cam Jurgens, who, as Traps notes in his grades, could be like a mentee to Jason Kelsey. They stopped Nakobe Dean's slide in the 3rd round, and maybe he won't play for a year. That's fine. It doesn't always work out. Sidney Jones didn't work out, but Nakobe Dean was the heart and soul of that Georgia defense. And if he comes back and he's Nakobe Dean, he's going to be an impact player, and it's worth a flyer at 83. I don't know a ton about Kyron Johnson, and Grant Calcaterra sounds like he blogs for NBC Sports about baseball. But we talk about this draft class as a whole, and we didn't even mention they have A.J. Brown. Like they got A.J. effing Brown. They got A.J. Brown and Jordan Davis. I love the way that they handled the first 2. And now I will say this. I don't know if we talked about this, and Debo, I don't know if you heard this or if you guys heard this, but apparently the Eagles had a deal done to go up and get Jameson Williams. and got sniped by the Lions. So then they reversed course and they said, all right, what we're going to do is snipe the Ravens and grab Jordan Davis. If you come out of the first round with Jordan Davis and A.J. Brown, who very clearly did, like the Titans did not want to trade him because Mike Vrabel was doing an angry toddler stomp in the draft room while wearing a suit as a giant former linebacker turned head coach meat stick. And I love Rays, but like, you know, and I don't blame him. I would have been in the corner pouting and wouldn't have come back on camera if you traded A.J. Brown on the clock in round 1 because we lowballed him at $16 million, a slap in the face. Eagles locked him in. Do we know if
Brinson? I mean, I was just going to ask. Love everything you just said, and agree. It seemed like the Eagles had interest, but do you still think they intended to go after A.J. Brown? Just when a deal like that happens and they sign him to this $100 million deal within 5 minutes of the trade happening, I feel like that was building up throughout the day, right? Or do you think like they could have gone in and like, hey, we'll trade up for Jameson and also trade for A.J. Brown?
That's a great question.
So it makes it a little less likely in my mind that they maybe were going for Jameson.
I agree.
That's probably true, but let's consider who's their quarterback. I'm doing
Carson Strong.
I do the thing where Carson Strong. I do the thing where I ask obvious questions.
But you're doing like Breech trivia time.
Yeah. So Jalen Hurts played where? Oklahoma and
Alabama.
Their number 1 wide receiver is Devontae Smith.
Williams.
All I'm saying is that I think that they were probably, and I know that like I think they were thinking about the possibility. I know that like Jalen Hurts and did J-Mo and Jalen Hurts play together? Probably were there for a year together.
Jameson Williams didn't even play with Mac Jones.
Oh, that's right, because he came from Ohio State. You're right.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Well, anyway, they're putting a bunch of Alabama guys in the same room and hoping it worked out. It didn't. They said they drafted A.J. Brown. My point being is that like I don't know the answer to that. I would think that the J-Mo was drafted and then they traded up for Jordan Davis and then they made the A.J. Brown trade, right? So I would think the A.J. Brown trade was probably a result of the J-Mo move up not working out. But there had been discussions about A.J. Brown over the last, as I think John Robinson said, 18-hour. Josh pointed out, like
it wasn't quite like flying Hollywood Brown to Arizona for the draft party. It wasn't as extravagant as that, but it seems like, I mean, it's easy to do, but like Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown were on FaceTime 2 seconds after the trade was made and he became an Eagle. Like, I feel like there was some indications.
Well, I mean, what we need to figure out is what is the time difference between you think people in the chat are like I don't remember Thursday. No, I don't remember Thursday. I don't remember what the time difference is between Jameson Williams being drafted by the Lions and A.J. Brown being traded to the Eagles. Like,
probably a half hour, but ultimately doesn't matter. Like,
so I would say the framework was in place, but I would guess that because I don't think that they could have gotten both Jameson and A.J. Brown because of the draft capital it would have involved. Although they could have certainly given up a pick next year. I don't think they wanted to do that, but they could have given a pick next year to get A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown, Jameson Williams, and Devontae Smith feels like Death Star overkill a little bit. Yeah. Maybe not.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I'd rather come away from this draft with Jordan Davis and A.J. Brown than Jameson Williams and A.J. Brown.
For sure. I'm saying that I think that there's probably parameters in place for an A.J. Brown deal. And Howie and the Eagles were like, okay, we are down for this deal, but we do have some guys that we're interested in the first round. We don't want to pull the trigger on the deal because A.J. Brown's going to be expensive until we see how the sort of the top of our wide receiver board plays out. And then once the Lions jumped up and grabbed J-Mo, at that point, Howie is like, all right, give us a second. We're going to jump up and grab Jordan Davis, and then we'll work out a deal where you guys send us A.J. Brown and we send you our second first-round pick. That seems to me like the likely timeline for that. That seem fair?
Fair. They're
You
winners.
guys are stunned with how clairvoyant that was. I'm done with my first winner. So I'll go back to you, Breech, to do your little special teams bit.
What is that supposed to mean? You know what, Brinson? I've
I'm
been
pumped
doing
for this. I'm
It was
pumped.
purposely insulting. Relax. Jeez.
the past 10 minutes. I have been trying to find out what the exact time was of so that we could put your little timeline theory and you could get it all figured out, because I do know that the AJ Brown trade was originally reported by Adam Schefter at 9:56 p.m.
Probably shouldn't have been so dismissive of you when you've got the receipts on my face. So.
Eastern time. Ha 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 ha.
9:56.
9:56.
That's.
And then the
Is it-
Lions trade came down at 9:24.
So it sounds like it's exactly the same timeline that I suggested.
It sounds like you might be right.
Anyway, talk about your precious little special teams.
So my winner were not just special teams, the punters specifically. This was a huge draft for punters. You do not see 4 punters drafted very often. As a matter of fact, this is only the second time it has happened over the past 20 years. The other time it happened was 2018, so recent, but still only the second time it's happened since 2000. And it really was interesting because of how early they got selected. I mean, we saw 2 punters go off the board in the 4th round, which almost never happens. This is only the 3rd time since 1990 that we have seen 2 punters go off the board by the 4th round. And, I mentioned earlier Jordan Stout being the first one. That is, he was one of the top 3 punters. I thought that he would get drafted, so it wasn't a surprise necessarily that he got drafted before Ariza, especially not surprising because it was John Harbaugh. Nobody knows special teams more than John Harbaugh, which I mentioned earlier. And you know what? The key punting metric that most people look at, you'll talk about Matt Ariza's hang time and out kicking their coverage, but when push comes to shove, what you want to know is a punter's net punting average, because if you can boom at 80 yards and your guys can't get there and you're giving up 10-yard returns, then your net punting average is going to go down. If you can finesse punter and maybe you can only punt at 50 yards, but you can kick it out of bounds at exactly 50 yards every time, then NFL teams are going to want you. And so Jordan Stout actually had a better net punting average than Matt Ariza last year. Just barely. Jordan Stout was 4th in the country and Ariza was 6th in the country. So they were very, very close. And then I would say Jake Camarda going to Tampa Bay was probably the surprise at 133rd overall. It's like the Buccaneers don't know what they're doing with special teams. We saw them make the Roberto Aguayo trade back in 2016. I would have taken Ariza or Trenton Gill, either one of those guys over Camarda. But Tampa took him in the 4th round, and he'll probably unseat Bradley Pinion. But the fact that 4 punters went was crazy. And then we saw Trapasso's boys, the Buffalo Bills, stop the bleeding. Everybody wondering why Punt God wasn't getting drafted. And then with the first pick of the 6th round, Ariza comes off the board. Josh Edwards kind of mocking Traps, though, by saying that this is just Corey Buarquez Jr. with the monster leg, but can't hold. Now, again, that's going to be interesting once he gets there. But this is a great landing spot for Ariza because, look, and Brinson, you pointed this out, and it was a great point, is that the Bills don't punt a lot. They had the 5th fewest punts in the NFL last year, and the Bills don't need a finesse punter. They just need someone, because if the Bills don't want to punt, no team wants to punt, but the Bills are going to go for it on 4th down and 4th and short. And so if the Bills are punting, it's going to be because they're at their own 30-yard line, at their own 20-yard line. And when you're punting in that situation, you can just say, hey, Matt, hey, Punt God, just punt a touchback. Just kick it 70 yards in the air and nobody has to cover anything. And so I won't be surprised if the Bills let him boom it out often. And then Brinson's boy, Trenton Gill from NC State, he's going to get a lot of work in Chicago. And I thought that was a smart pick by the Bears. And there were a bunch of good punters in this draft. And that is why we had a historical punting draft. This will be remembered as the year of the punters, the draft of the punters. The punters are winners.
Debo, if you could kindly just clip very quickly the portion of the program where Breech said that I made multiple good points about special teamers. I apologize for my faux dismissal.
I felt bad.
I got you.
All right. You don't really have to do it.
No, I was just clipping the stuff about you saying I bet the Eagles to win the Super Bowl. They're my favorite team. Blah blah blah.
Go Tar Heels. What a goon. What a goon. Hey, look, congratulations. I tell you what, I'm gonna sneak a third winner in here. The North Carolina Tar Heels football program.
You can't do that. To
Well,
expose
I
our
can.
slack
It's my
further,
podcast. I can do
you
whatever I
yelled
want.
at Traps for not
I can do whatever I
having
want. It's a bit. Let me do it. It's a bonus winner here. The North Carolina Tar Heels football program. They absolutely dominated the 5th round tonight. They had 3 guys taken in the first 30 picks of the 5th round. Anytime you could hype up like a bunch of recruits and win 6 games and then send 3 5th rounders to the NFL draft, you pat yourself on the back and say, Mac is back, baby. Mac is back. All right. Traps, who's your next one?
Wait, real quick. Whoever said the Browns had the winning draft, was that Trapasso?
Yeah.
Called the Browns winners. Yeah, and mentioned Cade York, and a commenter just mentioned Cade York. I will say I love that pick. Cade York was the number 1 kicker, I thought, in this draft, and I didn't even think it was close. I know the Cameron Dicker from Texas, people have talked about him. Nick Skiba from Wake Forest was the most accurate kicker in NCAA history when he ended his career this past year, and that's likable. But these guys, distance inaccuracy aren't really easy to find in college kickers. The Wake Forest kicker, yeah, he's accurate, but he never made a kick over 50 yards. So you don't know if he has any range, and Wake Forest didn't ask him to do much. And so that scares off NFL teams. But Cade York had both, and he was awesome at both. Last 2 years combined, he was 11 of 14 from beyond 50, which is
really good.
A miracle for Browns fans who got stuck watching Chase McLaughlin last year, who I think went 2 of 6, maybe 2 of 9 over his last 6 games. I mean, it was ugly. And so the Browns had to draft a kicker. And then you look at some of the times these strong-legged guys don't have the accuracy to go with it. Cade York, 90% from inside 50 yards last year, hit 9 of 10. And you know what? College, you get the wide hashes, so it's a little bit more difficult to try the closer kicks. And he nailed them. So I thought the Browns hit a home run with that pick.
The worst part about that for me is I had to listen to Breech talk about how awesome Cade York is, only to know that Corey Bjorquez is the punter right now, and he's going to be holding those kicks. That was the most difficult part about hearing that. But
what is happening? What are you doing? What are we doing here?
McLaughlin's not going to make a single.
Oh, you want to what? Oh, you're just bringing up total numbers? Get the out of here! I'm going to swear at you, Devo.
We want to go quality?
Yes, with quantity. Who cares about quantity?
All right, I'll start with Lawrence Taylor.
Okay, I mean, Lawrence Taylor's finished his NFL career before you were born, but sure, yeah, throw out Lawrence Taylor. That makes total sense.
Wait, what schools are we comparing? NC State and what?
We're not doing an NC State Carolina NFL draft comparison. We're at 57 minutes. Let's get along here. Traps, who's your next winner?
Phillip Rivers.
All right, mine is
I do respect Devo's quick ability to get
Mario Williams.
I'm gonna go with the Tennessee Titans, and it's not to say that I didn't like what the Eagles did, but the flip side of that AJ Brown trade, they draft Traylon Burks with that selection that they got from the Eagles, and then they traded back again when the Jets moved up to get Jermaine Johnson in the back part of the first round. With those picks after Traylon Burks, they got Roger McCreary from Auburn, who Josh and I liked a lot. Ryan Wilson liked a lot. Felt like a borderline first rounder. They got him in that trade with the Jets. They got Nicholas Petit-Frere, an offensive tackle from Ohio State. I'm not a huge fan of his, but they did need a right tackle, and that's where he's probably going to play. They also got Kyle Phillips, who's like a Cole Beasley type slot receiver, very good underneath, getting open with his quickness. And then they were able to use their 5th rounder and a 3rd rounder to trade up to get Malik Willis. So he was my number 1 quarterback. It was obvious that I was going to gravitate toward the Titans. And yes, I would have just paid AJ Brown and been done with it if I was Tennessee. But the fact that they got Traylon Burks, Roger McCreary, Nicholas Petit-Frere, Kyle Phillips, and then packaged up some extra picks to get Malik Willis, I thought that made them huge winners. On the flip side of those 2 round 1 draft trades, everyone said, oh my God, look at the Jets. They got Jermaine Johnson, and he was the number 8 player on their board, but he went 26th. And certainly, again, AJ Brown to the Eagles is huge. I like the flip side of it, actually, as the draft progressed for the Tennessee Titans. And you obviously have to factor in they didn't pay a wide receiver, $25 million per year. Again, I would have done it, but I was really interested to see what the Titans did with some of those selections that they got in those 2 trades in round 1. And I think they almost hit a home run. I mean, as good as you can do after you trade back, especially when you throw in Malik Willis, who is my number 1 quarterback.
Josh, I have some conflicting thoughts on the Titans coming up in the next section, but I don't agree. I don't disagree with the idea that, like, and it's weird because you can like
more
the
players
Titans
and they got
drafted,
good
and you can
players,
also
yeah.
find situations where someone didn't win. I think generally speaking, the Titans did a good job. I'm not sure the Titans are definitely better for next year, but we'll talk about that more down the road. Josh, your next winner.
So my second winner is the New York Jets. And I think it's the second year that I've called them a winner because I just like what Joe Douglas has done in the captain's chair of that organization. You start with Ahmad Sauce Gardner, who was my top overall prospect. I love his length. I love his competitive toughness, his ball skills dating back to his freshman year, all that kind of stuff. That's a premier position. So you've got that locked down for hopefully another decade before you have to worry about it again. You've got Garrett Wilson, who was my top-rated wide receiver, a guy that has tremendous body control down the field, knows what to do with the football in space once he gets it. Jermaine Johnson, where he was taken was probably more in line with how I viewed him, but it's a premier position, so you're getting a guy that you had a stronger conviction for, and he's going to be playing opposite Carl Lawson. I'll take that every day. I mean, to have 2 edge rushers of that quality is a luxury that most teams do not have. Breece Hall, again, a perfect fit for what they want to do. He's a perfect complement to Michael Carter in the backfield. Take a little bit of pressure off of Zach Wilson. Just gives them another dynamic, another physical element to the offense. Jeremy Ruckert, very well-balanced tight end. Wasn't really used as a pass catcher in Columbus, but I think he's got a little bit more there than what he's been able to show. He is a fantastic blocker, however, and when you look at the Jets and the wide zone blocking scheme that they employ, that's a perfect fit, a guy that can block in space, to maximize the potential of Breece Hall and Michael Carter. Max Mitchell, a very athletic offensive lineman out of Louisiana, played right tackle. He can play wherever you need him. He's a swing tackle all day when you've got George Fant and Mekhi Becton already there. I just think that's good depth. You get a guy with some upside that could grow into a larger role. And then to finish out with Michael Clemens, who really showed a lot more during his final season with the Aggies, and just gives you a little bit more depth at that edge rusher position. It was very easy to see their philosophy and what they were trying to do through this draft class.
I love it.
Oh, and then my bonus is the Haywards parents, because now they do not have to travel for multiple games on Sundays.
Yeah,
That is kind of cool. By the way, so does anybody know what Cameron Hayward's number is?
93?
97.
90, oh, yeah.
9 plus 7 is what?
16.
What does anybody know what number draft his younger brother was? Like what draft pick he was?
6
208
in the 7th round.
What's 2 times 8?
Oh my God, are you really doing
Oh.
that?
I thought
Nice.
that's late.
Okay, how about 6th round, 208th pick? What's 6 plus 2 plus 8?
Oh my God. This is some Illuminati stuff right here.
Guess how tall Connor Hayward is?
Devo's got his
6
finger
feet.
hovering over
He
the
is
in
6
podcast button.
6 feet.
I wish I could mute Brinson, Breech.
and Traps and Josh.
He just spends the rest of the
I
podcast
like
talking
Josh
about
is
the
like
Eagles.
outside. I like his addition here.
Oh, you didn't like my edition. You were trying to shut me up, but you love Josh's edition.
That's how it
I'm
goes.
going to go with the Falcons as my second winner. I kind of look, nobody really likes the Falcons in the sense from a national perspective. I kind of like the Falcons, but nobody's pumped up about the Falcons, right? I mean, generally speaking. However, I think if you look at this draft class, this is a pretty good draft by the Falcons. And it feels like Terry Fontenot is doing a good job acquiring good players. You know what I mean? It takes a while to figure out what a GM and a new coaching staff are doing. Like Drake London, Kyle Pitts / and then Marcus Mariota / Desmond Ridder. I don't know. I don't hate it. I don't think it's going to be like a top 10 offense or anything. I don't think it's going to be a top 15 offense in the league next year. But, a couple of weeks ago, and they might get Calvin Ridley back next year too. I mean, it felt like this offense was nothing. Like we joked on the podcast frequently that you can't name any of the Falcons wide receivers. And I know, Drake London doesn't solve everything, but if Ritter beats out Mariota, that means Ritter is playing well leading up to the season. And if he doesn't, you hope that Mariota in that Arthur Smith offense, which he should know, is playing well too. So I don't picture the Falcons necessarily as a playoff team or anything like that, but I do believe that they got a lot better. They made a ton of picks. I don't know a ton about these late guys like Algier, the running back out of BYU. I mean, Traps, you gave him a C+. You hate their late round picks, but my goodness, it feels like the first 5 picks for the Falcons are going to be impact players, and that they have at least given a little youthful energy to what was maybe one of the worst rosters in football. Like, I feel way better about the Falcons making some noise in 2022 than I do about the Panthers making some noise, and they drafted my guy Icky in the first round. Right? Doesn't that seem fair?
That's fair. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I agree with that.